The rain had not stopped for 3 days on the border world of Valari Prime. The sky was gray and sick, and the wind carried the smell of wet stone and burned metal from somewhere far away. The guards at the eastern gate stood in their silver armor, watching the empty plains with bored eyes. Nothing ever came from the east. Nothing had come from the east in 100 years. That direction led to the Dead Corridor, a stretch of space and land so destroyed by ancient wars that no species dared to cross it. So, when a shape appeared on the horizon, stumbling through the mud and rain, every guard on the wall stood a little straighter. "What is that?" one of them asked. The shape moved slowly. It fell, got up, fell again, and got up once more. It was not an animal. It carried something heavy on its back, something dark and large, wrapped in torn cloth. The captain of the gate, a tall Valari woman named Bora, lifted her viewing lens and looked through it. Her face changed immediately. Her 4 violet eyes went wide. Her mouth opened, but no words came out for a long moment. "That is a human," she said. The other guards looked at each other. Some of them had never seen a human before. Most species in this part of the galaxy had not seen a human in over a century. Humans were a story. Humans were something old people talked about when they wanted to scare children or impress them. They were legends from the Great War, the war that had burned half the galaxy and left the Dead Corridor as a scar across the stars. "Are you sure?" one guard asked. "I am sure," Bora said. "Send word to the palace, now." The human reached the gate, just as the sun disappeared behind the clouds completely. He collapsed onto his knees in the mud, and the heavy thing on his back fell beside him with a deep, metallic sound. The guards surrounded him with their weapons raised, but none of them moved closer. They just stared. He was tall, taller than most Valari by a full head. His skin was brown and cracked from sun and wind. His hair was black and cut short and dirty. His clothes were torn and stained with blood, some of it red, some of it colors that did not belong to humans. His hands were wrapped in bandages that had long since turned dark. His breathing was rough and painful, and every time he exhaled, a small cloud of mist left his mouth in the cold air. But it was his eyes that made the guards step back. Even on his knees, even half dead, his eyes were steady. They were dark brown, almost black, and they held something in them that the Valari did not have a word for. It was not anger, it was not fear, something that had been burned into him over a very long time. I need to see your queen," he started, and then coughed. Blood came out with the cough. "I need to see your queen." Bora looked at the thing he had been carrying. The torn cloth had come loose when it fell, and she could see black metal underneath. Armor, old armor, the kind of armor that did not exist anymore. "Who are you?" Bora asked. "My name is Teho," the human said, "and I have walked a very long way." Before Bora could respond, the sound of engines filled the air. A royal transport ship descended from the clouds, its golden hull shining even in the gray light. It landed just inside the gate, and the doors opened with a hiss of pressure. Queen Yuna stepped out. She was beautiful in the way that all Valari royalty were beautiful, tall, slender, with skin the color of pale moonlight, and 4 eyes that glowed soft purple. Her white robes moved in the wind, like water. Her silver crown sat on her head like it had grown there. She carried no weapon, but she did not need one. Every person at that gate would have died for her without a second thought. She walked toward the human, and the guards parted for her like a river splitting around a stone. Yuna stopped a few steps from Teho. She looked down at him. He looked up at her. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The rain fell between them. "A human," Yuna said softly. Her voice was calm, but there was something underneath it, Surprise, maybe, or curiosity, or something older and harder to name. I did not think I would ever see one in my lifetime. Your Majesty, Tejo said. He tried to stand, but his legs gave out, and he fell forward. 2 guards moved to catch him, but Yuna raised her hand and they stopped. Tejo caught himself with his hands in the mud. He pushed himself up, slowly, painfully. He stood on his own 2 feet, and he looked the queen in the eyes. I have come to warn you, he said. Warn me of what? Yuna asked. The Drakari, Tejo said. They are coming. They have rebuilt their fleet. They have crossed the dead corridor. I know this, because I watched them do it. I fought them on 3 worlds before I came here. I am the last one left. The silence that followed was heavy. The guards exchanged looks. The Drakari were supposed to be dead. The Drakari were supposed to have been destroyed in the Great War. Every child in the galaxy learned this in school. The Drakari are gone, Bora said from behind the queen. They were wiped out 300 years ago. No, Tejo said, they were not. They hid, they waited, and now they are coming back, and they are angry. Yuna studied the human's face for a long time. She was old enough and wise enough to know when someone was lying. He was broken, bleeding, and barely alive, but every word he spoke was the truth. Her eyes moved to the black armor on the ground. Something about it caught her attention. She took a step closer to it, then another. Bring that to the palace, she said quietly, and bring him too. Give him food, water, and a place to rest. Your Majesty, Jihun, her chief commander, spoke from beside the transport. He was a broad Valari male with sharp features and a permanent frown. We cannot simply allow a human into the capital. We know nothing about him. He could be... He walked across the dead corridor, Jihun, Yuna said, without turning around. Alone. Whatever he is, he has earned the right to speak. Jihun closed his mouth. He did not agree, but he did not argue. Not with the queen. Tejo was lifted by 2 guards and carried toward the transport. As they moved him, his hand reached out and grabbed the black armor. He would not let it go. Even half-conscious, his fingers held onto it like it was the last thing in the universe that mattered. Yuna watched him. She watched the way he held that armor. And deep in her chest, in a place where queens were not supposed to feel things like fear, something cold began to grow. She had seen that armor before. Not in person. In paintings. In old war records. In the stories her grandmother used to tell her when she was small. And if that armor was what she thought it was, then the human was not the thing she should be afraid of. It was what was coming after him. Tejo slept for 2 days. They put him in a room deep inside the palace, a room with thick walls and a soft bed, and windows that looked out over the golden city of Valari Prime. Healers came and went. They cleaned his wounds, wrapped his broken ribs, and treated the infections that had spread across his body. One of the healers, a quiet old woman named Unji, said it was a miracle the human was alive at all. His body has been pushed far past its limit, Unji told the queen when she asked. He has broken bones that healed wrong and then broke again. He has burns on his back from plasma fire. He has cuts from blades I do not recognize. And his hands are the worst. Whatever he has been holding on to, he has been holding on to it for a very long time. Yuna listened to all of this without expression. When Unji left, the queen sat alone in her study and looked at the black armor that had been placed on a table in the center of the room. That was the first thing she noticed. It was not beautiful or graceful like Valari armor. It was heavy and rough and covered in marks. Deep scratches ran across the chest plate, like something with claws had tried to tear through it. Burn marks stained the shoulders and arms, and in some places the metal had melted and then cooled again in strange, twisted shapes. One side of the helmet had a long crack running from the top to the jaw. The whole thing smelled like smoke and old blood, but it was the engravings, that made Yuna's heart beat faster. She leaned closer. Along the edges of the chest plate, cut into the metal with a rough hand, were symbols. They were not Valari symbols. They were not Drakari symbols. They were human symbols, old ones, from a language that most of the galaxy had forgotten. Yuna had studied ancient human culture when she was young. It had been a hobby, something her advisors had called a waste of time. But she remembered enough to read the words carved into the armor. Hold the line. 3 words, simple words. But Yuna's hands began to shake when she read them. She walked to the far wall of her study, where old books and records were kept behind glass. She pulled out a thick volume, a war record from 300 years ago, from the time of the Great War. She turned the pages carefully until she found what she was looking for. A painting, old and faded, but still clear enough to see. It showed a bridge, a narrow bridge over a river of fire on a world called Arion. And on that bridge, standing alone against an army of thousands, was a single human in black armor. The armor in the painting had the same scratches, the same burn marks, the same crack on the helmet, and on the chest plate, the same 3 words. Hold the line. The painting had a title written underneath it in old Valari script. The Ghost of Arion, the human who would not fall. Yuna closed the book. She put her hands flat on the table and stared at the armor. Her mind was racing. The story of the Ghost of Arion was one of the most famous stories from the Great War. Every species in the galaxy knew it. 300 years ago, when the Drakari had invaded Valari space for the first time, they had sent an army of 10,000 soldiers to cross the Bridge of Arion and take the capital. The Valari defense had collapsed. The army was in full retreat. There was nothing standing between the Drakari and the total destruction of the Valari people. Nothing except one human. No one knew his name. The records had been lost in the fires. But the story said he walked onto that bridge alone, wearing black armor, and he fought. He fought for 6 hours. He fought until the bridge was covered in Drakari bodies. He fought until the Valari army had time to regroup and launch a counterattack. He fought until the Drakari broke and ran. And then he disappeared. No one ever saw him again. No one ever found his body. He became a ghost, a legend, a story that parents told their children to remind them that even in the darkest moment, one person could change everything. Yuna had always believed it was just a story. A beautiful story, yes, an important story, but still just a story, made bigger over time by people who needed to believe in heroes. But now the armor was sitting on her table, real, solid, heavy with the weight of 3 centuries. The door opened, and Ji-hoon walked in. He looked at the armor, and then at the queen, and his frown deepened. "You have been staring at that thing for hours," he said. "Do you know what this is?" Yuna asked. "It is old human armor," Ji-hoon said. "Outdated, not worth the metal it is made of," Yuna said. "This is the armor of the Ghost of Arion." Ji-hoon was quiet for a moment. Then he made a sound that was halfway between a laugh and a cough. "Your Majesty, with respect, the Ghost of Arion is a fairy tale." "Then explain this." Yuna held up the war record and showed him the painting. Then she pointed at the armor. The scratches matched, the burns matched, the crack on the helmet matched. Even the shape of the melted metal on the left shoulder was the same. Ji-hoon's smile faded slowly. He looked at the painting. He looked at the armor. He looked back at the painting. "It could be a copy," he said, but his voice had lost its certainty. "A copy of armor that no one has seen in 300 years, Yuna said. "A copy carried by a human who walked alone across the dead corridor." "You are smarter than that, Ji-hoon." Ji-hoon crossed his arms. He did not like this. He did not like humans, and he did not like legends, and he especially did not like when the two came together. Legends made people do stupid things. Legends made people believe in miracles instead of strategy. Even if it is real, Ji-hoon said carefully, it is just armor. The man wearing it is half dead. He cannot even stand on his own. Whatever the ghost of Arion was, this man is not him. He is just a human carrying an old relic. Perhaps, Yuna said. But she did not believe that. She had seen Taeho's eyes when he stood up in the mud. She had seen the way he held the armor even when his body was failing. That was not a man carrying a relic. That was a man carrying a purpose. I want to speak with him when he wakes, Yuna said. And if his warning about the Drakari is true, Ji-hoon asked, then we prepare for war. With what? Ji-hoon asked. His voice was hard now. Our fleet is half the size it was during the Great War. Our army has not fought a real battle in decades. If the Drakari have truly returned with a full fleet, we cannot stop them, not alone. Then it is a good thing we are not alone, Yuna said. She looked at the armor one more time. We have a human. Ji-hoon stared at her. One human. The last time one human stood between the Drakari and our people, Yuna said quietly. It was enough. She turned and walked out of the room, leaving Ji-hoon standing alone with the armor of a legend. He looked at it for a long time. The black metal seemed to absorb the light around it, like it was hungry, like it was waiting for something. Ji-hoon was not a man who believed in legends. He believed in numbers, in strategy, in the cold logic of war. But standing there in the quiet room with that ancient armor, he felt something he had not felt in a very long time. He felt small. And somewhere deep inside the palace, in a room with thick walls and a soft bed, Taeho opened his eyes. Taeho sat on the edge of his bed and looked at his hands. The bandages were fresh and white, but underneath them he could feel the old scars. He could feel every line, every ridge, every place where the skin had been torn open and grown back wrong. His hands told the story of his life better than his mouth ever could. A servant had left food on the table beside the window. Strange food. Fruits he did not recognize, bread that was too soft, and a drink that glowed faintly blue. He ate all of it. He had learned a long time ago to eat whatever was in front of him, because he never knew when he would eat again. The door opened. Queen Yuna entered, followed by Ji-hoon and 2 guards. Taeho stood immediately. His body screamed at him, but he stood. His father had taught him that much. You always stand when someone important enters the room. You stand even when it hurts, especially when it hurts. Sit, Yuna said gently. You are still healing. Taeho said, I have been healing for 10 years. I do not think I will ever finish. Yuna pulled a chair across from him and sat down. Ji-hoon stood behind her with his arms crossed. The 2 guards stayed by the door. Tell me about the armor, Yuna said. Taeho was quiet for a moment. He looked past the queen, toward the table in the corner where they had placed the black armor. It sat there like a sleeping animal, dark, heavy, and patient. It belonged to my ancestor, Taeho said. My family has kept it for 300 years. It has been passed down from parent to child, generation after generation. Each one of us swore the same oath when we received it. What oath? Yuna asked. To finish what he started, Taeho said. And what did he start? He started a war against the Drakari, Taeho said. Not just a battle, a war. The bridge at Arion was not supposed to be his last stand. It was supposed to be his first. He had a plan, a way to find the Drakari homeworld and end them forever. But he was alone, and he was wounded, and after the bridge, he could not continue. So, he went home. He found a wife. He had a son, and he passed the armor down, along with everything he had learned about the Drakari. Their weaknesses, their patterns, their hiding places, Each generation added to that knowledge. Ji-hoon spoke from behind the queen. You are saying your family has been preparing for the Drakari's return for 300 years. Yes, Taeho said. That is insane, Ji-hoon said. Maybe, Taeho said, but we were right. Ji-hoon stepped forward. He was bigger than Taeho, and in the small room, his presence was heavy. How do we know any of this is true? You show up with old armor and a good story. That doesn't make you a descendant of a legend. That makes you a man with old armor and a good story. Taeho looked at Ji-hoon. He did not blink. He did not look away. You are a soldier, he said. I am the chief commander of the Valari military, Ji-hoon corrected. Then you know what plasma burns look like on metal, Taeho said. You know what Drakari claws do to armor plating. You know that the crack on that helmet was made by a Drakari warhammer, because no other weapon in the galaxy leaves that pattern. You have seen the evidence. You just do not want to believe it. Ji-hoon opened his mouth, and then closed it. He looked at the queen. Yuna's face gave nothing away. The armor is real, Yuna said. I have compared it to the war records myself. Every mark matches. Every engraving matches. This is the armor of the ghost of Arion. Even if the armor is real, Ji-hoon said, and his voice was tight now, controlled, like a man trying very hard to stay calm. This man is not the ghost. The ghost held a bridge against 10,000 soldiers. This man collapsed in the mud at our gate. The ghost collapsed too, Taeho said quietly. After the bridge, he could barely walk. He crawled for 2 days before a Valari patrol found him and brought him to safety. That part of the story is never told, is it? People do not like that part. They like the part where he stands and fights. They do not like the part where he falls down and bleeds and begs his body to keep going for just one more step. The room was very quiet. My ancestor was not a god, Taeho continued. He was a man. A tired, broken, stubborn man who decided that he would not let people die if he could stop it. That is all. That is the whole legend. And I am the same. I am tired. I am broken. But I am here, and I am telling you that the Drakari are coming, and if you do not prepare, everyone on this world will die. Yuna leaned forward. How long do we have? Days, Taeho said. Maybe less. Their fleet was behind me when I crossed the dead corridor. I moved faster because I was alone, but they are not slow. They will be here soon. How many ships? Ji-hoon asked. Despite his doubts, the soldier in him was already working, already calculating. I counted over 200 warships, Taeho said, and one command vessel, the size of a small moon. Ji-hoon's face went pale. The Valari fleet had 43 ships, 43 against 200. The math was simple and terrible. We cannot win that fight, Ji-hoon said to the queen. We need to evacuate. There is nowhere to evacuate to, Yuna said. Valari Prime is surrounded by the dead corridor on 3 sides. The only safe path leads directly into Drakari space. If we run into them. Then we are dead, Ji-hoon said flatly. No, Taeho said. Both of them looked at him. The Drakari are powerful, Taeho said, but they have a weakness. They always have. 300 years ago, my ancestor discovered it, and it cost him everything to use it. The Drakari are a hive species. Their soldiers, their pilots, their workers, they are all connected to a central command mind on the command vessel. Kill the command mind, and the entire fleet goes dark. Every ship, every soldier. They do not die, but they stop. They become confused, lost, like children without a parent. And how do you kill something on a ship the size of a small moon? Ji-hoon asked. You do not attack the ship, Taeho said. You go inside it. Ji-hoon laughed. It was a short, sharp, bitter laugh. You want to walk into the most heavily guarded vessel in the Drakari fleet and kill their command mind, alone. Not alone, Tejo said. I will need a distraction. Your fleet does not need to win. It just needs to keep the Drakari busy long enough for me to get inside. That is suicide, Jihun said. It is the only plan that works, Tejo said. My family has spent 300 years studying the Drakari. I know the layout of their command vessels. I know where the command mind sits. I know the path through their defenses. This is what I was born for. This is what every person in my bloodline was born for. Yuna looked at Tejo for a long time. She searched his face for doubt, for fear, for any sign that he did not believe what he was saying. She found none. You would die, she said. Probably, Tejo said. And you accept that? Tejo looked at the armor on the table. The black metal caught the light from the window and held it, like a promise. My ancestor held a bridge so your people could live, he said. I can hold a corridor inside a ship for the same reason. I have been waiting for this. Yuna stood. She looked at Jihun. Prepare the fleet, she said. Your Majesty, prepare the fleet, Jihun. Jihun stared at her. Then he stared at Tejo. Then he turned and walked out of the room, without another word. Yuna looked back at Tejo. If this fails, she said, my people die. If we do nothing, Tejo said, your people die anyway. At least this way we choose how we fight. Yuna nodded slowly. She turned to leave but stopped at the door. The stories say the ghost of Arion had no fear, she said. Tejo shook his head. He was terrified. He told his son that he was so afraid on that bridge that he could not feel his hands. But he stayed anyway. That is what humans do. We stay. Yuna left the room, and Tejo sat alone with the armor of his ancestor and the weight of 300 years, and he began to prepare for the last fight of his bloodline. The sky turned black on the third morning. It did not happen slowly. It happened all at once, like someone had blown out a candle the size of a sun. One moment the sky was pale blue with thin white clouds, and the next moment it was filled with ships, hundreds of them, dark, angular, covered in spines and ridges like the bones of some enormous dead creature. They blocked out the light and cast a shadow over the entire city. The people of Valari Prime looked up and saw death. Alarms rang across the capital. Soldiers ran to their positions. Civilians were pushed into underground shelters. Children cried, and parents held them tight and whispered things that were not true. Things like, it will be all right, and we are safe. Nobody was safe. Everyone knew it. In the command center of the palace, Jihun stood before a wall of screens and watched the Drakari fleet spread across the sky like a disease. His officers stood around him, and every one of them had the same look on their faces, the look of people who had just done the math and did not like the answer. 217 warships, one officer reported. One command vessel. They are holding formation at high orbit. Why are they waiting? Another officer asked. Because they want us to see them, Jihun said. They want us to be afraid before they attack. The Drakari feed on fear. It makes their soldiers stronger. The door opened, and Tejo walked in. Every head in the room turned. Every voice went silent. Tejo was wearing the armor. The black metal covered him from neck to feet, and it fit him like it had been made for his body. The scratches and burn marks and the cracked helmet, all of the damage that had looked ugly on the table, now looked different on a living person. It looked like a history. It looked like proof. Every mark was a fight that the armor had survived. Every scar was a story of something terrible that had tried to destroy it, and failed. Tejo moved through the room like he did not notice the stairs. He walked to the main screen and looked at the Drakari fleet. The command vessel, he said. Where is it? Jihun pointed to a massive shape at the center of the fleet. It was enormous, 10 times the size of the largest warship. It looked less like a ship and more like a floating fortress, covered in dark metal and glowing with a sickly red light. "There," Ji-hoon said, "right in the middle, protected on all sides." "Good," Tae-ho said. "That means your fleet only needs to open a path through one side." Ji-hoon turned to face him fully. The commander's face was hard, but something had changed in his eyes since their last conversation. It was not trust, not yet, but it was something close to respect. "I have 43 ships," Ji-hoon said. "I cannot break through that fleet." "You do not need to break through," Tae-ho said. "You need to make noise. Attack the left side. Hit them hard and fast. Make them think that is where the real attack is. While they turn to face your fleet, I will go in from the right, alone, in a small transport. By the time they notice me, I will already be inside." "And then what?" "And then I walk." Ji-hoon blinked. "You walk. Through the ship, to the command mind." "My family mapped the interior of Drakari command vessels over 3 centuries. I know the corridors. I know the guard positions. I know where the mine sits and how it is protected. I will reach it." "There will be thousands of Drakari soldiers inside that vessel," Ji-hoon said. Tae-ho said nothing. He just looked at Ji-hoon with those dark, steady eyes. Ji-hoon shook his head slowly. "You are out of your mind." "Probably," Tae-ho said again. Queen Yuna arrived then, dressed not in her white robes, but in the formal armor of the Valari crown, silver and light, with her family crest on the chest. She looked like a different person. She looked like a queen going to war. "Status," she said. "They will attack within the hour," Ji-hoon said. "The human wants us to serve as a distraction while he flies into the command vessel and kills the command mind. It is the most insane plan I have heard in 30 years of military service." "Is it the only plan?" Yuna asked. Ji-hoon paused. He looked at his officers. He looked at the screens. He looked at the numbers. Then he looked at the floor. "Yes," he said quietly. "It is the only plan." Yuna turned to Tae-ho. "Then we follow it." The next 30 minutes moved fast. Tae-ho was given a small transport ship, barely larger than a shuttle. It had no weapons and almost no shields. "I do not need weapons," Tae-ho had said. "I need speed." Ji-hoon's officers loaded the ship with extra fuel and a single emergency beacon that Tae-ho could activate when the command mind was dead. When Tae-ho walked to the launch bay, the Valari soldiers in the hallway stopped and stared. Word had spread through the palace. Everyone knew about the human and his armor. Everyone knew the story of the ghost of Arion. And now, seeing Tae-ho in that ancient black armor, walking toward a ship that would carry him into the heart of the enemy fleet, every soldier felt something they could not explain. It was not hope exactly. It was older than that. It was the feeling of watching someone do something impossible simply because they had decided to do it. Yuna met him at the bay door. She stood in front of him, and for a moment, she was not a queen. She was just a person, looking at another person who was about to die. "I have sent a message to every world in the Valari system," she said. "I told them about you. I told them about the armor. I told them that a human, one human, chose to stand with us when he did not have to." "I had to," Tae-ho said. "No," Yuna said. "You did not. That is what makes it matter." She reached out and placed her hand on the chest plate of the armor, right over the words, "Hold the line." Her hand was pale and thin, and her fingers trembled slightly. "Come back," she said. Tae-ho did not make a promise. He nodded once, then turned and walked into the ship. Minutes later, Ji-hoon gave the order. The Valari fleet launched from the surface like a swarm of silver arrows. 43 ships against 217. They hit the left side of the Drakari fleet with everything they had. Plasma fire lit up the sky. Explosions bloomed like flowers in the dark. The Drakari turned to face the attack, their formation shifting like a living thing. And on the right side, in the gap that opened for just a few seconds, a tiny transport ship slipped through. Nobody noticed it. Nobody noticed the small human ship threading between the massive warships like a needle through cloth. Nobody noticed it dock with the command vessel. Nobody noticed the airlock open. Nobody noticed Tejo step inside. The corridors of the Drakari command vessel were dark and warm and smelled like something rotten. The walls were not smooth. They were ridged and organic, like the inside of a living creature. Red light pulsed along the ceiling in a slow rhythm, like a heartbeat. Tejo drew his weapon, an old blade, passed down with the armor. It was not a gun. Guns were loud. Guns told everyone where you were. A blade was quiet. A blade was personal. The first Drakari guard did not see him coming. It was tall and thin, with gray skin and too many joints, and it crumpled to the floor before it could make a sound. The second one was faster. It saw Tejo and opened its mouth to scream, but Tejo was already moving. The blade cut through the air, and the scream died before it began. Above him, outside, the battle raged. Jihoon's fleet was taking heavy losses. Ships exploded and burned and fell out of the sky. But they kept fighting. They kept making noise. They kept the Drakari's attention on the left side, while Tejo moved deeper and deeper into the command vessel. He followed the path his family had memorized over 3 centuries. Left at the third junction, down 2 levels, through the maintenance corridor, past the breeding chambers, around the guard post. Every turn was exactly where it was supposed to be. He was bleeding. A Drakari blade had caught his arm, cutting through a gap in the armor. Another had slashed his leg. He could not stop. 300 years of preparation, 10 years of fighting, and the lives of every person on Valari Prime were all behind him, pushing him forward like a river. He reached the final corridor. It was wide and lined with guards, dozens of them, standing in 2 rows like statues. At the end of the corridor was a massive door, sealed with locks that glowed red. Behind that door was the command mind. Tejo looked at the guards. The guards looked at him. He raised his blade, and he walked forward. The corridor became a graveyard. Tejo moved through the Drakari guards the way a storm moves through a forest. He did not fight the way the Valari fought, with grace and distance and careful technique. He fought the way humans fight, close, ugly, and relentless. When one guard swung at him, he stepped into the blow instead of away from it, let the armor absorb the hit, and drove his blade into the creature's throat. When 2 more came at him from the sides, he dropped low, let them crash into each other, and cut them both before they could recover. The guards were fast. They were strong. Their claws could tear metal, and their teeth could bite through bone. But they had never fought a human before. They did not understand what they were dealing with. Every time they knocked Tejo down, he got back up. Every time they cut him, he kept moving. Every time they thought he was finished, he was not. Blood covered the floor. His armor was dented and scratched in new places now, fresh marks joining the old ones from 300 years of battles. The blade in his hand was slick and dark. He reached the door. It was sealed with 3 heavy locks, each one glowing red. Tejo did not have the tools to pick them. He did not have explosives. He had a blade and his hands, and 3 centuries of rage that had been passed down through his bloodline, like a fire that would not go out. He jammed the blade into the first lock and twisted. The metal screamed. The lock broke. He moved to the second one and did the same thing. The blade bent. He did not care. He forced it through the mechanism until the lock shattered. The third lock was the hardest. The blade snapped in half. Tejo dropped it, grabbed the lock with both hands, and pulled. His muscles burned. His bones ached. The bandages on his hands tore open, and blood ran down his wrists. Something in his shoulder popped, and pain exploded through his body like fire. He did not stop. He pulled until the lock cracked, and then he pulled until it broke, and then the door swung open. The room behind the door was enormous. It was round, with walls that curved upward into a high ceiling that pulsed with red light. In the center of the room, sitting in a nest of wires and organic tubes, was the command mind. It was not what Tejo had expected. It was small, no bigger than a child. It had the same gray skin as the other Drakari, but its body was soft and formless, like something that had never needed to move. Its eyes were closed. Tubes ran from its head into the walls, into the floor, into the ceiling, connecting it to every ship and every soldier in the fleet. It breathed slowly, and with each breath, the red light in the room pulsed. This was the brain of the Drakari. This was the thing that controlled them all. Without it, the fleet was nothing. Without it, the soldiers were lost. Tejo walked toward it. The command mind opened its eyes. They were black, completely black, with no white, no color, nothing. Just two holes that seemed to go on forever. It spoke, not with sound, but with something that pressed directly into Tejo's mind. The voice was cold and ancient, and it filled every corner of his skull. "You are like the other one," it said, "the one from the bridge." Tejo stopped. His heart was pounding. His hands were shaking. "You remember him." "I remember everything," the command mind said. "I remember the bridge. I remember the human who stood on it. I remember his fear. I remember his pain. And I remember that he could not finish what he started." "That is why I am here," Tejo said. "You will fail too," the command mind said. "You are one. We are many. You are flesh. We are endless. Your kind has always been this way, loud and brave and ultimately pointless. You fight. You bleed. You die, and the galaxy moves on without you." Tejo looked at the command mind. He looked at the tubes connecting it to the fleet. He looked at the red light pulsing in the walls like a heartbeat. "My ancestor was afraid on that bridge," Tejo said. "He was so afraid he could not feel his hands. But he stayed. And his son was afraid when he took the armor and swore the oath. And his daughter after him was afraid. And every single person in my family who carried this armor was afraid. We have been afraid for 300 years. He took a step closer. But we stayed. He took another step. We always stay. The command mind screamed. It was not a sound. It was a wave of energy that hit Tejo like a wall. It threw him backward. He crashed into the floor. His vision went white. Every cell in his body told him to stop, to give up, to lie down and let the darkness take him. He got up. He got up because his father had gotten up, because his grandmother had gotten up, because every person in his bloodline had been knocked down and had gotten up over and over for 300 years. He crossed the room. The command mind screamed again and again, and each scream was stronger than the last. Tejo's nose bled. His eyes bled. His body was breaking apart from the inside. But he kept walking. He reached the command mind. He reached down with his bloody, broken hands, and he grabbed the primary tube, the main connection that linked the mind to the fleet, and he pulled it free. The scream that followed was not in his head. It was real. It shook the entire ship. The red light flickered and died. The tubes went dark. The command mind's eyes went wide, then empty, then closed, and then silence. Outside, in the space above Valari Prime, the Drakari fleet stopped. Every ship, every fighter, every weapon, they all stopped at the same moment, like puppets with their strings cut. Some of them drifted. Some of them collided with each other. Some of them began to fall toward the planet, pulled by gravity with no mind to steer them away. On the bridge of his command ship, Ji-hoon watched with wide eyes. His fleet was battered and burning. He had lost 12 ships. Hundreds of his people were dead. He had been seconds away from ordering a retreat that would have meant the end of everything. "What happened?" one of his officers whispered. "The human," Ji-hoon said. His voice was rough. "The human happened." A small, steady light on Ji-hoon's screen, coming from inside the Drakari command vessel. He was alive. It took 4 hours to reach him. The Drakari soldiers inside the command vessel were wandering in circles, confused, harmless, unable to function without the command mind. Ji-hoon led the rescue team himself. He did not trust anyone else to do it. They found Taeho in the round room, sitting on the floor with his back against the wall. His armor was destroyed. The chest plate was cracked in half. The helmet was gone. The left arm piece was missing entirely. Blood pooled around him in a wide circle. But he was breathing. Ji-hoon knelt beside him. He looked at the human, this small, broken, impossible human, and he felt something crack inside his own chest. Something that had been hard for a very long time suddenly became soft. "You did it," Ji-hoon said. Taeho opened one eye. "I told you." Ji-hoon almost smiled. Almost. "You are a lunatic." "Probably," Taeho said for the third time, and this time Ji-hoon laughed. It was a real laugh. The first real laugh he had made in years. They carried Taeho out of the command vessel and brought him back to Valari Prime. The city was still standing. The people were coming out of the shelters, looking up at the sky with disbelief. Drakari ships were drifting and falling, burning up in the atmosphere like meteors. The war was over. It had lasted less than a day, and it had been won by one man. Queen Yuna was waiting on the landing platform when Ji-hoon's ship touched down. She was still in her silver armor, and her face was streaked with tears she had not bothered to wipe away. When the doors opened, and Ji-hoon carried Taeho out on a stretcher, a sound rose from the crowd that had gathered. A sound like a wave, like a prayer, like 1,000 voices saying the same thing at once. Yuna walked to the stretcher. She looked down at Taeho. His eyes were half open. His breathing was shallow. But he saw her, and something that might have been a smile crossed his face. Yuna knelt. The queen of the Valari people knelt before a broken human soldier on a stretcher, and she did not care who saw it. "The legend never died," she said. Her voice was thick with emotion but steady. It was just waiting. Taeho shook his head, very slowly. "Not a legend," he whispered. "Just a man." "No," Yuna said. She placed her hand on what was left of the armor, the shattered chestplate, with those 3 words still visible under the blood and the damage. "Hold the line. You are more than that. You have always been more than that." She stood and turned to face the crowd, her people, thousands of them, watching, waiting, holding their breath. "Send a message to every world," Yuna said. Her voice carried across the platform like thunder. "Every system, every corner of the galaxy. Tell them what happened here today. Tell them that the Drakari came with 200 ships and a weapon the size of a moon. Tell them that we had 43 ships and 1 human." She paused. "Tell them that it was enough." The message went out that day. It traveled at the speed of light across the galaxy, reaching worlds that had not heard from the Valari in decades. It reached human colonies that had been silent for a century. It reached species that had forgotten what humans were. And everywhere it went, it carried the same story. The story of a man in old black armor who walked into the heart of an enemy fleet and ended a war with his bare hands. Within a week, ships began arriving at Valari Prime. Human ships. Old, battered, held together with tape and hope, but real. Humans from scattered colonies, from forgotten outposts, from the edges of the galaxy where they had been hiding and surviving and waiting. They came because the story reminded them of who they were. Taeho stood on the palace balcony, weeks later, watching the ships arrive. His arm was in a sling, his ribs were wrapped, his hands were covered in fresh bandages, but he was standing. Yuna stood beside him. "What will you do now?" she asked. Taeho looked at the ships. He looked at the humans climbing out of them, tired, scared, hopeful. He looked at the black armor, repaired and resting on a stand inside the palace, waiting for the next time it would be needed. The armor was meant to be passed down, he said. But I think the legend was never about the armor. It was about the choice. The choice to stay when everything tells you to run. He looked at Yuna. I think it is time to teach that choice to everyone. Yuna smiled. It was a rare thing. A Valari queen smiling. And it changed her entire face. She looked like someone who had just been handed something precious. Then, stay, she said. Stay and teach. Tejo looked out at the sky. The stars were visible again, bright and clean, now that the Drakkari ships had been cleared away. Somewhere out there, in the dark between the stars, there were more threats, more enemies, more battles waiting to happen. The galaxy was not safe. It would never be safe. But that was all right, because as long as there was one person willing to hold the line, the darkness could not win. That was the lesson of the ghost of Arion. That was the lesson of every human who had ever stood when they should have fallen. You do not need to be a legend. You just need to stay.